folks, and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/094, and you can email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net. You can also call the voicemail hotline at 202-930-1109, and you can check everything out also on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. This is Tim Mooney back again, episode 94 of the Pedalshift Project. And I'm excited to share today on this particular pod the preview for my next big bike tour. As I've been talking about incessantly for the last several episodes, I am going to be going on a ride on the Pacific Coast again. And I'll talk a little bit about why very shortly. And in fact, the next time you'll hear from me will be the wrap-up of said ride. This is going to be the last pod until that episode, so it's going to be a few weeks off while I go off and enjoy the ride. That's just like a little programming note there. And so I'll be, of course, on the socials. I'll talk all about that as well. But we're just going to kick it all off with the journal. We also are going to be going into a little bit of work in the lab. I know it's been a few episodes since we did that. We're going to be talking about tools to work remotely, which, of course, is sort of relevant to my upcoming tour. So anyways, let's kick it all off with the journal. The journal, of course, is where we talk about each other's bicycle tours, and on this episode, we'll talk about mine, if you will allow me, which I guess you have no choice because I have the microphone, right? All right, so Pacific Coast 2017. What's the idea here? Well, I've talked a little bit about the choice in all of this. It's going to be going from Newport, Oregon to San Francisco. Oh, Tim, you may be asking, why not Portland? I just did the Portland-ish to Newport ride last year, as you may recall, as sort of the final ride of the season. I believe that was last August, and you can go check that out on a past episode of the pod. You can also check out the Pedalshift Tour Journals. I believe that's volume, what would that be? 7, I think that would be, for more on that. So I didn't want to redo that section of the coast so soon. It is a wonderful section of the coast. I think it's actually probably my favorite part of the Oregon coast. But that being said, I also didn't want to do the full 16 days between Tillamook and San Francisco. I wanted it to be below 2 weeks total, just because of the amount of time that I perceived that I had at the time when I was pulling this all together. So the idea here is to not retrace anything from last year and yet to do a ride that I haven't done since 2014. If you've been with the pod for any stretch of time, you know that 2014 was kind of my biggest tour, sort of the signature tour of my relatively meager career. And that is the entire Pacific Coast from Canada all the way down to the Mexican border. And this is a good chunk of it right now, that I'll be doing. And I've got the ride overview. You can go to the show notes, and that's of course pedalshift.net/094, and check out my ride with GPS, overview. I've got embedded in there also the map, and you can see that it's color coded by day. Is this definitely the route that I'm doing? Yes, it is my intention that this is the exact route that I'll be doing. Is it the day by day for sure how I'm going to be doing it? No. And I'll probably talk a little bit more about that when I do the wrap up of the ride. There's a few points in the ride where you have a choice of doing a longer day on the first day or a longer day on the second day. And it just sort of depends on what your energy level is. In the past, and I think I talked about this during the 2014 ride, there was a section where I was pretty sure that what the Purple Book Guide, the Guide to Bicycling the Pacific Coast, I think that they have the route a little bit aggressive on one of the days, and that I would have split it up a little bit differently. Now this year, I don't know, maybe I'll end up following what they recommend. But the nice thing about what the book recommends is that it's just spaced out really nicely. There's no day that's over or much over 70 miles. There are frequently days that are in the 40-mile range. I mix it up a little bit because I like to stay at certain places over others on their itinerary. For instance, I prefer to stay in Fortuna rather than Eureka. There's a great, your choice is, you could conceivably find a state park that's somewhere nearby, Fortuna, but I end up staying at the same place that I've been staying at for years since my very first tour with the Climate Ride folks. And that is because it is right next door to Eel River Brewing, which is a really good place to get a beer. And at that point in the ride, it's always awesome to have a really good place to get a beer. So anyways, check it out. That got that ride overview in there, and you can kind of see what the daily mileage is at least meant to look like. I think I'm not sure if I'm going to use Ride with GPS for tracking my ride like I did for the Pennsylvania ride. It's a big drain on the battery. I think that it might be helpful for some of the turn by turns that I may be doing. We'll just have to see how that all goes. If I do it, I don't think I'll be broadcasting that live or anything like that, but it might be helpful for down the line. I think it might be a useful tool for anybody that's considering doing this ride, because this is basically what the ACA route is. This is what the book recommends. But it's also got a couple of my recommendations in terms of places to stay. As far as starting out the trip, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different with this. Ordinarily, I'm a big fan of mass transit. I've talked about the Wave, which is the Tillamook County bus that takes you from Portland to Tillamook to get you started. Now, of course, I'm not going to be starting in Tillamook. I'm going to be starting significantly further south from there in Newport, which is usually a day and sometimes 2 days of a ride from the Tillamook area. So what I've decided to do instead is, although there is a mass transit route available, you could take the Wave and connect that with some of the Oregon coastal buses and get down to Newport. It's doable. It would be about $25, and the connections are, I'm going to say, a little bit on the tight side. Now, I think that the connections are designed to interact with each other, but having to do 3 separate buses made me feel a little bit wonky, because I really wanted to make sure that I was going to be starting in Newport on the day that I wanted to start. So what I've decided to do is to get a one-way car rental. It ended up being a little bit more expensive. I think it might have been about $20 more expensive to do the one-day car rental. But it gives me a bunch of additional, I guess, goodies out of that. Number one, I don't have to worry about missing any connections or anything like that, or getting to a connection where the bus is already filled with another bike or other bikes. Cause I think the racks can only hold 2, although they're pretty good on the coast about getting more bikes on there. I wanted the security of knowing that I could get to my starting point without any problem. So I've got also the added flexibility, of course, of leaving when I want to, and perhaps most importantly, being able to do a supply run before handing my car over to the good folks in Newport at whatever car rental agency I'm using. It escapes my mind at this point. I think there is just one option available to you, but it ends up working out really well. I know that I can do any food shopping and fuel shopping ahead of time. I can drive out to the coast at whatever point I want to. I may actually go out Highway 26 and go through the northern part of the coast just to see it. I think a lot's going to depend on what I perceive as the traffic and stuff like that. I just don't want to have a lot of hassles when it comes to driving that part of the coast, because I'm really going to be excited about getting the bike out of the back of that car and starting to go. It's going to be a total of 13 days of riding and 13 nights of camping. So of course, it's offset. I'm not going to be camping once I hit San Francisco. It's going to be the first night camping will be in Newport. I'm going to be staying at South Beach State Park. That is my preferred campground. You've got 2 choices in the Newport area. Most people start at the one that's kind of just north of town. I prefer the one that's just south of town, not just because it's a little bit further south, but because it's got really great access to the Rogue Brewing facility there, and it's a great place to get a beer. You may have found a few things in my discussion here. Great place to get a beer is a compelling reason for me to choose a place to stay, but that's pretty much it. So the great elements of all of this, 13 days of riding, 13 nights of camping. I think that the riding is really well spaced, as I talked about before. I've got my planned short day of 31 miles, and that is going to be going from Fortuna into Burlington Campground. That's on the Avenue of the Giants. The nice thing about that short day is it is following a pretty aggressive 70 plus mile day, that gets me from, I believe is it Eureka? I believe it's from Eureka down to Fortuna. And it's a very flat end to that ride, but it is a long day. My recollection is that it's always a really easy, fast ride at the end, mainly because I'm excited to get to beer. So, but that short day is kind of nice to mix in there, because what I end up having is another short day following that. It's closer to 40 some miles. And then the next day is the Leggett Hill climb. The one thing that might be an area where I do a changeover, because depending on what the weather is like, I may choose to do Leggett Hill earlier. I tend to prefer, based on the last time that I did it, to do it when it is cooler and when I'm fresh. And that means staying in Standish Hickey campground and then doing it, because Standish Hickey I think it's maybe like a couple of miles until you make the turn onto Highway 1 and then go up and over Leggett. The thing about that is that, of course, that's easier, but if it's hot, which it may be on that side of the mountain, it's not pleasant to sleep in the heat for me, as I think I've established over and over again. But at that time in October, it may be cooler. It's just a question of what's going on. Also, is it going to be raining? What's the weather going to be like? I've done Leggett Hill in the rain, and I'm here to tell you it's no bueno. I've done it in the cooler air. I've done it in smoky forest fire air. I've done it in a few instances, and I do have to say there are better conditions make it a lot easier to do. So that's one of the areas where I may deviate from my plan. The one nice thing about staying in Standish Hickey on the hot side of Leggett, as it were, the inland side of Leggett, is that the next day is spaced out a little bit more. If I end up going up and over, I'm only 15 miles from my next campground stay, and that is at McCarrature State Beach, which is really, really close to Fort Bragg, California. And Fort Bragg's another great town with, yes, you guessed it, very good beer. So I like to stay at McCarrature, and I don't intend to not do it. That 15-mile stretch from the other side of Leggett, there is a campground, a beachside campground there, which is really cool, and I've stayed there before. The crazy thing about that is that those 15 miles they've always been hard on me. I usually end up with a rough headwind. It's a very weird set of rolling hills. They don't roll very well. They're very steep. So I find that it's a rough, tough 15 miles for me, even though that on paper, it just doesn't seem to be that much. But if I'm coming all the way from Burlington Campground, certainly it's possible, but I think that ends up being a close to 85, 90 mile day if I do it all at once. So the prospect of going all the way to McCarrature and maybe doing a 0 mile the next day, I suppose that's possible, but it's really unlikely. It's totally outside of my normal bag to do something like that. But who knows? I may be feeling it. I don't know. I think for the first time this late in the season, not in what I would call great biking shape. Now, I'm as light as I've ever been. I've talked a little bit about this, that I've really dumped a ton of weight and it's really staying off this time. But I have not been on the bike. I have not been doing hills. So I don't know how things are going to be going. I'll be riding pretty fully loaded, and I'm not sure how easy or hard it's going to be. Now, by that point, I'll have ridden a few days, so maybe I've biked myself into shape a little bit. We'll see. I just am going to have to play that all by ear. I think I'll follow the book as a guideline. I usually tend to do that, and we'll just let the days come to me. I think what I found, and what I think many of you have found as well in our discussions, is whatever you sort of set your day to be in your head, you tend to get to a point where by the time you are close, you're kind of done for the day. Very rarely do I find myself saying, I think I'm going to do 60 miles today. That at the end of those 60 miles, I'm sort of like, yeah, let's do another 20. It's very rare that I like to do that. So that's sort of the background for most of the mileage in there. Longest day planned is 71 miles, and that's from Humbug Mountain. That's the furthest southernmost Oregon campsite that I intend to stay at. And I'm going to be going all the way to Crescent City, California. That reason is, again, for one of staging for the next day. The next day, although it would be a shorter ride, going from Crescent City to Elk Prairie, it is It has some really gnarly hills, some of my favorite hills in all of the Pacific coast is in that stretch right there. I think my first favorite are the Seven Devils, which are, I think, the day before, or maybe 2 days before. But on this ride, there's a triple summit hill, and it's the second highest summits outside of Leggett. Those are just south of Crescent City. I love that ride. You work your tail off to get up to it. You're going through some beautiful redwoods going up those big hills. You get this beautiful vista if the fog allows. And then you have this beautiful screaming ride all the way down. And then another big ride up, and then another great glide down to Elk Prairie. Big hills, and they do take a little bit out of you. So I tend to prefer to get those last that extra 20 miles into Crescent City rather than finishing off up in Oregon at the southernmost campsite there. I'd rather do the extra 20 miles, get down to Crescent City on a long day, and have a shorter day going into Elk Prairie because of those climbs. That was a mouthful. If you could follow all of this without looking at a map, more power to you. It's an audio medium, as you can tell. I'm going to be riding this solo. There was some talk, I think I may even mentioned on prior pod, that MJ might be joining. It turns out he is going to be just hanging out with me at the end of the ride in San Francisco. He'll be hosting me in San Francisco, which is always awesome. And, of course, we're going to do some cool ride in the future. I think that's certainly in the cards. They're unplanned at this point, but we'll definitely ride again together in the future. If it's not riding with MJ, I think I've mentioned this before. I sort of like the idea of riding alone. I have grown to be, for a bit of an extrovert that I am. You can't do a podcast and not be an extrovert. Just going to throw that out at you. I find that I am much more of an introvert when I am bicycle touring. I don't like riding with people. Even when MJ and I ride together, we tend to separate. I like going at my own pace. I don't like being in a pack. I don't like feeling that pressure either as a leader or the follower. I've described it before that I feel a little bit claustrophobic even. I know that sounds strange. I'm outside yet feeling claustrophobic, but some of you may know what I'm talking about. So riding solo to me is no big problem at all. I also get a chance to share this ride with all of you through all the social media and whatnot. So in some ways, I don't feel lonely at all. I certainly have all my connected devices, such as they are when I have a signal. So I like the concept of touring solo. It just is what it is. Now, I mentioned the connected devices. I am not planning on doing a live show this go around, just due to the spotty connectivity for stretches of the ride, especially in California, but also in certain parts of Oregon. It's hard to get a broadcast out. So rather than promise something, I'm just going to not do it this time. It's not to say that I won't be recording. I'm also looking at maybe doing some video. I'm hoping to do it for real this time. I want to get some content for the YouTube channel and just to be able to share some of the sights of things as well as the sounds and as well as the storytelling. So that's my idea here on this one. So if you were looking forward to having the sort of nightly show, I don't think I'm going to be doing it this time. And what I'll do is we'll have that all set for the wrap-up episode coming in a few weeks. And I think, as I had mentioned, that's going to be coming, middle of October before I leave. It'll be that Thursday that I am in San Francisco. And actually, I'll be flying home that morning to DC. But that show will release that morning as normal, 7 a.m. Eastern time, 4 a.m. Pacific. That's not going to feel so hot. Should I promise something different? No, I'll do it the night before. It's cool. I'm hoping to get some looks at some of the sites. That's one of my goals, is to get out there. And I talked about this actually on last week's pod. I really want to get out and see more stuff. I did a better job of that last year. And in part, I was able to do that because I really slowed things down and I went to lighthouses and I did things that I'd never done before because I'm usually about pounding out miles on these tours. So I'd like to do that, but I'm also realizing that I have some limitations, and the most notable limitation is, ta-da, time of year. It's October, y'all, and that means that there is much less sun that's going to be available. My days are much shorter than they are in the middle of the summer when I'm used to doing these rides. So while I'm hopeful that I'll be able to see some more sights, I also have to be mindful of the fact that I really need to get these miles in when I can get them in. On those 70-mile days in particular, I've really got to be mindful of when light begins and when light ends. This ride, I'm definitely going to be bringing lights with me just because, A, you never know, it can always be foggy, but also, I might be finishing a day in twilight, or maybe starting a morning, particularly, there's one in particular that I'm thinking of right now that is going to be done, at the beginning of the day, maybe not before sunrise, but certainly at a time when there's not going to be full sun going on. So that's another piece of the puzzle there as well. I think I talked about the dunes and sand dunes in Oregon. I really would like to see those. On the first camping night, I'll be in Honeyman State Park. That is right in the heart of sand dune country, Florence, Oregon. I'm really going to try to make sure that I walk out of the campsite, bring my phone with me, and take some damn pictures of those dunes because, I've done this ride a few times. I've never done it. Isn't that strange? And isn't that silly? I'm going to do it this time. I'm not sure what the weather will have in store. I've sort of alluded to this earlier here. It should be mild and dry, but the weather these days is throwing so many curveballs that you can shake a mixed metaphor at. See what I did there? So I'll be ready for anything from high heat days to cold nights to wet riding and everything in between. I'm hoping for what I'm used to for a summer ride. But it's not going to be summer. It's going to be fall. So we'll see what happens. When I did this ride before, especially in the California part, in October, it's supposed to be nice, but we got hit hard with rain the entire time. So you never know what can happen. Even when the weather's supposed to be nice, and the climate suggests that it's supposed to be nice at that time of year, you never know when a storm can roll in. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be ready for anything. I'm also prepared to enjoy myself even if the weather is lousy. If the weather's stupid hot, I'll enjoy it. If the weather is stupid cold and stupid wet, I know I'm going to enjoy it because I've got that mindset going into it. My expectation is not, oh, I hope it doesn't rain. It's more like, you know what? If it rains, so be it. I've got the gear to handle it. And, that's sort of a good mindset to have on a bike tour so it doesn't ruin it for you if the weather throws you a curveball. I'm hoping to ride pretty light. I'm going to be making an adjustment to the Green Goblin. Those of you who are new to the show, I've got a bike that lives out on the West Coast, and it is a vintage Novara Safari, I believe from 1998, if my recollection is correct, if memory serves. It's called the Green Goblin because it is, in fact, green, and my sister-in-law gave me she works in the beer industry. She gave me a sticker from Stone Brewing Company, which is the gargoyle with the beer on it, and I put that on the bike, and then it became the Green Goblin, so that is the Green Goblin. It has historically been a rear rack only bike, but because Sequoia Semperviens, my bigger steed, the one that lives out here on the East Coast, has a front platform rack as well, I have found that the weight distribution works so much better. So what I've done is I have made a couple of purchases and shipped them ahead of me. And I'll be assembling them on the couple of off days that I have in Portland before the tour. And it's going to be putting on a front rack, a smaller one, but just a big enough one to be able to bungee maybe my sleep kit or maybe the tent to the front rack, pull a little bit more weight to the front of that bike. Due to some quirky combination of narrower handlebars, they've got this bike the Goblin has the same mustache style handlebars as Sequoia. However, because it's an older model, it's a different set of handlebars and they're much narrower. My handlebar bag, which also lives out on the West Coast, is a huge one. It's really wide and really deep, and it only fits in a particular angle right now. So I've got to get an extender, which I've gone ahead and purchased, to push it up higher and over to allow for the rack to have enough space between the bottom of that handlebar bag and whatever I'm going to be jamming in there. And hopefully it'll all work out. We'll have to see. I think it'll be enough space. I don't know. We'll see. I'll take a bunch of pictures after I'm all done with it. I think that this will really make the Goblin a better touring bike. I think it works really well. It's a little small framed for me and my height. I got it because it was just such a good buy. I bought it from the Community Cycling Center in Portland, Oregon, and Northeast Portland, not far from where my brother lives. And I really love the bike, even if every time I come up to it, I'm like, oh, this frame is a lot smaller than I should have. But by the time I'm riding around on it and I'm on tour, I get so used to it, it doesn't even matter when all is said and done. It just works. And I really do like having that bike. You may be asking, Tim, why this ride again? I'd have to say it's because I really love this ride. I haven't done this stretch since my big 2014 ride. I talked about that at the top of the show. And there's something about crossing the Golden Gate Bridge as the finish line for your tour that is just magical. I mean, there's no other word to put it. It also opens up things for next year when I'm looking to do some newer rides, given that I've got a slightly more flexible schedule now. This ride has just been beckoning me to return and do it again. I just haven't had the time to do it. And so I think that by doing it now at the close of this season, or at least as my last big tour for this season, I definitely intend to get out on the C&O a couple times, maybe this fall, perhaps with Belle Starr, who is snoozing right to my left right now. I think it's going to really open up things for next year. I've talked about it on the pod. I'd like to do the Katy Trail at some point. I'd like to do some of the other rides that are all around the U.S. in particular. It's just easier to do the U.S. rides. But I would like to get internationally as well. I've got a cousin who, for the time being, lives in Brussels. So maybe doing Paris to Brussels at some point would be kind of a cool thing. So lots of possibilities. That's all going to be opened up in 2018. I got to scratch this itch at least one more time. I'm sure I will be back again. But this ride just really draws you in. The Oregon coast and the California coast are so great for bike touring. I love the C&O. I love the Gap. Those are great for off-road stuff. But for road touring, being on asphalt, this is a great stretch. The amenities are just simply fantastic. And that just makes it a little bit easier. There's something nice about a familiar ride too. I think that I certainly scratch that itch when I'm on the C&O. I mean, I know what's around every corner on the C&O. And I'm getting to the point now where I've done these rides a few times on the West Coast that I feel sort of the same way. And when you see familiar things, it just brings back really good memories and sometimes not so great memories of rides past. So I really like experiencing that again at the speed of a bike. It just makes things that much more fun. So that's why I'm doing this ride again, and I can't wait to share it all with you. I want you to follow along. I'll be doing a lot of stuff through Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Be sure you're following along. I'll be posting there frequently, signal willing. Again, I'm not going to be doing the sort of quasi-live daily, nightly podcasts like I've been doing in the past. I think that I will have a better chance to tell the story in a better narrative by doing them separately and not having the pressure to do them during the rides themselves. I definitely am going to be recording stuff, definitely going to be doing video. I talked about all this earlier, but that's sort of where I'm at for this ride. So I've been thinking about this. I'm going to confess to you, I think I want to write a little bit more. I looked back on a writing that I did for this very route back way before pre-Pedalshift days. And I am sort of thinking that I want to write again. So if you'll indulge me in that, I may be posting a few things on the Pedalshift blog. I know you're used to seeing mostly show notes and podcast episodes there. I might start throwing a few more written pieces there if I'm feeling it and I'm feeling a little bit more in the writing mood. I think I'm in that headspace right now. So we'll see how that all goes. No promises, but I would like to start writing a little bit more on pedalshift.net because as I say at the end of every podcast, lots of great content there. Next up on the show is the Lab, and the Lab is that long-lost portion of the show that I haven't done in forever, where we talk about experimental things that maybe you want to toy around with around bicycle touring. So on this episode, I would like to talk about tools to work remotely. This is, I think, relevant to this episode because I am preparing to bring all of these types of things with me to be able to do some work while I'm on tour. To be sure, this is not a working tour. It is not intended for that. I need a freaking break after all of the excitement of the summer, and I put excitement and scare quotes. I talked about it a couple of episodes ago. My girlfriend Kimberly sold the yoga business. It took a lot of doing and a lot of working, and I am looking forward to having a bit of a break. I've managed to get a lot of client stuff done ahead of time. I've got the chance to have a bit of a break. That being said, I look to bring all of you along on the ride, and I am intending on bringing my usual working gear with me. So I thought I would share with you how I do all of this and the different types of tools that you may want to consider doing if you need to do some work remotely while you are on bike tour. So I'm going to start off with the most important thing, and that is my smartphone. I am an unabashed iOS user. I tend to use Apple products for just about everything that I use, and I use the iPhone. I am currently still rocking the iPhone 6 Plus. Yes, I said 6, not 7, not 8, not 10. I normally am an early adopter, but the 6 level of phone ended up being just fine for me, and I've been able to use it for several years now, and it's been just fine. While I've been tempted to do the upgrade, in terms of the connectivity, in terms of future-proofing and all of that, this phone has been really a good workhorse for me, and it's got a great camera and can handle a lot of things for me. So that's what I have been using and plan to continue to use for the near future. One thing that I would recommend if you are going to be planning on doing any work on your phone is the larger model phones are nice for extra screen real estate, to be sure, but they also do better for battery life because you can fit a larger battery in there. The other thing that I would recommend if you're going to be thinking about doing some work on your phone, whether that's just dealing with emails or any of the other various things that you could do in app-based systems, whether it's Android or iOS, is to consider getting the largest capacity one that you can get, especially if you're going to be doing things like taking lots of photos or doing lots of videos or anything along those lines. It's really helpful to not have to offload stuff as you go along. And that's something that I have found to be particularly true when I'm doing a lot of podcast stuff, when I'm taking lots of pictures. It's just a lot easier to have a big capacity phone. So when you're doing your purchasing, think about it in those ways. So that's the phone. I use AT&T as my carrier of choice. That is largely a legacy thing. I was one of those fools that got the very first iPhone and stood in line and, had the phone that did very little in retrospect, but was super cool for the time. And I've just stuck with AT&T since then. Where I go, it tends to be the best signal and the best data speed for me. However, the next tool that I'm going to talk about is something to help fill in the gap when AT&T isn't the best choice. And that is I bring along an iPad mini. I have a stupid old iPad mini. It's, I think, iPad mini 2. It is really old, but it works just great. And it holds a battery charge forever. So it's great for doing things like email and stuff like that. But more importantly, it is a cellular-based one as well. And so what I have is a Verizon card and a T-Mobile card for that iPad mini. And what that does is I can tether to all of my devices if for some reason AT&T doesn't get a signal. And I am here to tell you AT&T doesn't get a signal in parts of the California coast, in particular in Northern California, and Verizon does. So it allows me to stay connected in places where AT&T can't. Why do I have T-Mobile? Well, I got a T-Mobile plan for free. They gave away at one point 250 megabytes, I think, per month for life for free. And I got that. And it's great when I am in a city. It does not connect very well elsewhere. For those of you who are from out of the country, we have very curious, mobile connectivity. We'll just put it that way. The tablet's really helpful for when the phone can't be. The tablet also allows me easier iOS app interface for things like podcast editing. I use a podcast editor rarely, but when I do, it is available on that, and it's kind of helpful from time to time. Frankly, the tablet is there mostly because it is another battery sink for me to be able to do things like, say, watch videos in the tent or stuff like that and not be draining from the phone. It's just another place to store electrons. And when the phone is the place where I tend to draw the most from, and of course, I don't have a generator, a dyno hub on the Green Goblin. So I'm not going to be generating as we roll. I'm going to be bringing a bunch of big batteries with me. That's going to be your best bet, especially because I'm not going to be more than 3 or 4 days between long abilities to plug in and recharge just based on my itinerary. Third thing I'm going to be bringing is my laptop. The laptop I use is actually the one I'm recording on right now. It is the MacBook Air 11-inch. They don't even make these anymore as far as I know. The thing that's great about this is it's light, it's portable, it's easy to deal with. It's an older machine of mine. It is something that I would be very sad if I lost or if it got broken or anything like that. But at the same time, it's really sort of perfect for bicycle touring. I fit it into a neoprene sleeve, which is the same material that wetsuits are made out of. And so that gives it some cushion. It gives it a little bit of additional water resistance, as it were. It also, of course, goes inside of a dry sack or a pannier, depending on the day. It is super helpful for all of the big ticket projects that I would be working on. So I am not intending on doing any work. However, if any of my clients have a 911, including Kimberly, if something comes up, or if, anybody, then I do have the ability to get in, tether to my phone or to my tablet, and everything will be fine. I'll be able to do stuff from there. But also I'll be in some coffee shops from time to time, and it's a great thing to pull out, be able to be a little bit more efficient. I found, and I talked about this on a past pod, maybe not on a podcast, but maybe on a past written blog post. That's what the kids call them, of Pedalshift, is that my efficiency on tablets and iOS is not as high as it is on a traditional computer. And I'm trying to eventually wean myself off from that. But until that day happens, the laptop is the most efficient thing for me. So that's why I bring that. So you look at what I bring. I bring a phone, I bring a tablet, I bring a laptop. They all fit different niches. They all fit different use scenarios. I would say that the tablet would be the first one that I would give up, because I do think that the laptop is so important for me to be able to do work. Your mileage may vary. Those three things together are all really important. The tablet gives me the extra connectivity if I'm in a different cellular location. The phone is my primary means of navigation, communication, whatnot. The laptop is the most efficient way to do heavier lifting work. Everything sort of is dependent on what your needs are. If I didn't use the laptop, what I've done in the past is I've used screen sharing apps, and I keep the laptop connected at home or in an office. And that can work to a certain degree, but as I alluded, your efficiency really drops. Sometimes it's sort of like, do I want to bring the laptop? No, I'd rather not risk it, rather not have the extra weight. But if your efficiency drops a ton, it may be worth to bring the laptop. So screen sharing apps are really helpful. I've used a bunch of different ones. Screens for iOS and Mac is really, really good. I actually don't use that one. I use a free one, but Screens is the one that's generally most recommended for heavy lift applications. Windows, you can use a variety of different ones as well. Your mileage may vary. Autoresponders on emails, I'm not going to need that for this particular trip, but if I did have people that might be emailing me or getting in touch, it's always good to have an autoresponder up for when you're on tour, just to set expectations. When people know that you are gone and that you're not necessarily going to respond within your usual 24 hours or however long your usual turnaround time is, it's really helpful. It's also good for setting expectations for existing clients. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember Tim's on bike tour and he's probably, this can wait. That's hopefully what I'm going to be hearing from a lot of folks. Push notifications on apps. I'll use Airbnb as an example. The one thing that I will be paying attention to while I'm gone is the fact that I've got renters at my cabin in West Virginia, and I've got to be responsive to those folks. They don't know, nor will they care that I am on bike tour. They will care if something goes wrong or if they need something or they have a question. And the nice thing about the Airbnb app is that it will push through to my phone or to my tablet if someone texts me or messages me through the app. And so that's really helpful as well. So if I'm on the road and someone's got a question, boom, it'll pop up right in front of me on my phone. So that's really helpful as well. I would say, as I mentioned before, and this is just reiterating, consider multiple devices or even multiple cell phones or multiple network SIMs if you know that you're going to be going through areas where one carrier is going to have a signal and another carrier is going to be flat. So just to be able to handle things, as I mentioned, California has good Verizon sections where there are bad AT&T sections. That's why I do what I do for all of that. These are all the various tools to work remotely. I think that to sum it all up, I am a very connected person, and that's why the tips that I have here are all very related to connectivity. Some of you may have jobs that require very little to no connectivity. You're actually going to be working in the towns that you're going to. So that's the type of way that you'll be operating. But still, I think that in modern times, connectivity is sort of the first thing about being able to work remotely. If you have a profession or if you have a skill even that allows you to work remotely IRL in real life, I think that's awesome. We know Jasmine Reese, who's been on the pod before, will go out and busk with her violin. I mean, that's an awesome thing. I've listened to other podcasts before where people have talked about they are able to make head badges for touring bicycles and things like that. Some people that will do day labor or whatever on farms and whatnot. That's all really awesome too. And you can take a couple of days, work it into a 0 mile day, work it into maybe doing some service work. Those are all different ways to work remotely as well. For me, and I think for many of you, especially if you're listening to a podcast, you at least understand the whole technology behind the whole thing, right? And technology is kind of the thing that allows us to leverage the ability to work remotely. And that's why so much of my talk here in this episode has been about the different tools that allow you to do all of that. So I'm curious what you all use. I've talked about this on the pod before, of course, but I thought that this would be a good opportunity to chat about it relevant to the tour that's coming up. So if you've got any questions or any thoughts on how you work remotely, love to hear about them. You can share them at pedalshift.net. As always, we like to close out the show with a big thank you to all of the supporters through the Pedalshift Society. If you like what you hear, you can help maintain Pedalshift as an independent, listener-supported voice while expanding the offerings. We're talking $5, $2, or even $1 a month helps with the cost of hosting the pod and the website, and you can do it for a bit and cancel anytime. One-shot support is welcome if you're not into the small monthly thing. Check it out and join at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Ethan Georgie, Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lane, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Josiah Matthews, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittis, Thomas Skadow, Seth Krieger, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Noah Schroer, Harry Telgadis, John Sikorsky, Richard Killian, Chris Barron, Scott Taylor, Brian Wren, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Paul Mulvey, Stuart Buchan, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Harry Hugel, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Ruth Divorcey, Michelle Miller, Matthew Lewis, Michael Baker, Billy Crafton, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Matt Perry, Danielle Jepson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, and Bobby Ruppel. And thanks also to all anonymous and past contributors for making this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfields' latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.